For 3 decades, I gave my son everything, every cent, every dream, every sleepless night. And yet, he stared me down and said coldly, "You mean nothing to us," before throwing me out. The world whispered that I was shattered. But in court, I simply smiled, pulled a yellowed paper from my coat, and handed it to the judge. When he read it, my son let out a cry that echoed in the courtroom. That was the moment justice finally stirred. The case clattered onto the glass table with a sharpness that cut through the silence. Nolan paced across the living room, the click of his leather shoes echoing on the polished floorboards. "You think we owe you something?" he snapped, his tone slicing through the space. "You mean nothing to us." I stood motionless, my hand wrapped around the handle of a modest suitcase. His words pierced deeper than I ever expected. Every syllable felt like a blade twisting into my chest. 30 years. Every dollar, every sacrifice, every night I stayed awake wondering if he was safe, poured into him. And now this. Karina leaned against the edge of a white leather sofa, arms crossed, a faint, knowing smirk on her lips. "Elias, you don't want to drag this out," she said, her voice smooth as silk but cold as the granite counter behind her. "It's time to leave." The room shimmered with quiet opulence. A crystal chandelier hung above, towering windows let in the gray dusk, and a wine glass lay on its side, its burgundy stain creeping into the cream rug. This house, once mine, was the one I had signed over to Nolan 6 years ago. Now it felt foreign. I had gifted it to him out of love. "Foolish." "Nolan," I murmured, voice cracking though I tried to hold it steady, "I gave you everything." He stopped pacing. The silver band of his wedding ring caught the light as he pointed toward the door. "And I'm done carrying you. Get out." Karina's hand twitched slightly, the only sign of discomfort, but her gaze stayed locked on mine, challenging me to break. I wanted to yell, to grab his shoulders and shake some memory into him, to remind him of the boy who once wept in my arms after losing his mother. But that child was gone. In his place stood a stranger, face hardened with disdain. My fingers brushed the inside of my coat pocket, where a weathered envelope crinkled beneath the fabric. Not yet, I thought. Not here. I lifted the suitcase, light, carrying only a few shirts, an old photo of my late wife, Helena, and that envelope. Its weight grounded me, though I still couldn't name the feeling it gave. "Elias," Karina said, stepping forward. Her perfume was sharp, expensive. "Don't make a scene. It's beneath you." I met her gaze, jaw clenched. "You'll regret this," I said, unsure whether it was a warning or a plea. Nolan laughed, a cruel, mirthless sound. "Regret? You're the one who'll end up sorry, old man." I turned toward the door, heart pounding so loud it drowned out her parting shot. "Take care, Elias." The door loomed ahead, heavy oak with brass accents, the final line between the life I built and whatever waited outside. I opened it. A cold gust hit me, rain instantly soaking my coat. "Nolan," I said without turning, "you're wrong about me." No reply came. The door slammed behind me with a thud that vibrated in my bones. Rain came down in sheets, the glow of a distant lamp blurring through the downpour. I stood motionless for a moment, suitcase in hand. No car, no destination, no plan. People would whisper I'd been discarded, pitiful Elias cast aside. But as the storm drenched me, something faint sparked inside. Not sorrow, not yet. Just a flicker. A small ember in the darkness, still burning. I stepped forward, the suitcase suddenly heavier, and let the night swallow me whole. The mattress sagged beneath my weight, creaking with every shift. I sat beneath the dim glow of a lone vault, listening to the muffled arguments from the apartment next door. My new place in Brenton was a far cry from the estate in East Stone Hills. I'd once imagined a different life, travel, laughter, Helena at my side. Now, just this, a chipped coffee mug, a wobbly table, and a silence that pressed in from every side. I unzipped the suitcase and pulled out a faded photograph. Helena's smile lit up the frame, her hair glinting in the sun. Nolan was tucked beside her, maybe 7 then, all gap-toothed grin and sticky hands. I used to carry him on my shoulders, promising him the world. After Helena passed in '96, that promise became my purpose. I worked back-to-back shifts, skipped vacations, let go of my dreams of visiting Europe, all to give him more. I remember the stack of bills we used to hide under placemats, how I'd tell him, "We're fine, kiddo," even when we weren't. The scent of mildew lingered in the air. A leaky faucet tapped out a slow, rhythmic beat into the silence. I set the photo down, my hands trembling. Had I gone too far? Loved him too much? Maybe that was my mistake. I gave him everything, his education, the house, even my pride when I signed it over. And for what? You mean nothing to us. His voice echoed again in my mind, just as sharp as when he'd said it. I dug deeper into the suitcase, past an old wool sweater, and there it was. The envelope. Yellowed, edges worn, my former address scrawled in my own handwriting. I had kept it all these years, tucked away like a secret too heavy to face. My fingers traced the sealed edge. Not yet. I didn't know exactly what it meant, only that it mattered. In my mind, I saw Nolan at 17, eyes wide with excitement, asking me to visit his university. "You'll come, right, Dad?" I'd smiled, even though I couldn't afford the trip. "Sure, son." Another lie to keep him dreaming. Now, I wondered what he'd say if I asked, "Why, Nolan? What didn't I give you?" The phone vibrated on the chip table. Nolan's name lit up the screen. My thumb hovered for a second, then pressed decline. I didn't want his apologies, if he even meant to offer one. Karina's voice echoed in my head, too. "Elias, be reasonable." I powered the phone off. Silence returned, louder than before. I stood and paced the small apartment. The floor creaked beneath every step. My thoughts drifted to Helena's old coffee mug, the one she clutched every morning. It still had the chip from when Nolan dropped it as a toddler. I'd kept it after she passed. Now, like so many things, it was sealed away in a forgotten box. The days since that night had melted into each other. I'd found this place, a one-room studio tucked behind a strip mall in Avondale. Cheap. Invisible. I spent the first week unpacking, deliberately avoiding mirrors, avoiding my own reflection. But tonight felt different. I placed the envelope on the table. Its weight exceeded that of the suitcase it had come from. It wasn't just paper. It was a piece of myself I'd buried long ago. I sank onto the bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Nolan believed he'd erased me, that I'd slip quietly into nothing. He was wrong. A new emotion rose within me, sharp, unfamiliar. Not sorrow. Not yet. Anger. Coiling like vines through cracked cement. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this much. I wasn't finished. The library door banged shut behind me, louder than I intended. The sound vanished into the steady hum of the Renholm Public Library. I needed a place to direct the storm inside me, and these rows of aging books offered that chance. 2 weeks since Nolan's betrayal, and the sting hadn't dulled, but something else was emerging. A hunger to reclaim what was mine. I dropped into a chair at a long wooden table. Legal texts piled before me, property law, contracts, wills. Words that once felt irrelevant, but now held the weight of weapons. I had given Nolan the deed, but there had to be a way, some clause, some error, to reclaim even a fragment of what I'd lost. My pen scraped across the page, each note a quiet rebellion against the son who'd cast me aside. "You look like you're ready to go to war," said a voice. I looked up. A woman in her mid-50s stood across the table, damped from the rain, glasses resting low on her nose. Her expression held no judgment, just recognition. "Maybe I am," I replied with a faint smile. She took the seat across from me, setting a heavy book on the table. "Alira Maddox," she said. "I'm a lawyer, and you look like someone who needs one." "Elias Mercer," I said. "I'm trying to figure things out." "Figuring things out usually means trouble," she said, tilting her head. "Want to talk?" I hesitated. Then, without planning to, I spoke. Told her about Nolan, about the house, about the words that still stung. "You mean nothing to us." Saying them out loud felt like opening a pressure valve. Alira's joy tightened slightly. "Some sons don't deserve the fathers they get." "About you," she nodded. "You're not done yet." She slid a book across the table. "Fundamentals of Property Law. Start with this. It's not as tedious as it looks." We spoke for over an hour, the quiet hum of the library fading into the background. She shared fragments of her own story, a bitter divorce, a daughter who hadn't called in years. I know what it's like to lose family, she said, but that doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. Her words struck something deep. I thought again of the envelope, still hidden in my apartment drawer. It wasn't just history, it was a spark. A key. How do I fight this? I asked. Alira leaned in. Find their weak points, she said with a calm certainty. People like your son, they get careless. They believe they're untouchable. That's where you start. We moved to a nearby cafe. Rain tapped against the windows, mixing with the scent of strong coffee. My phone buzzed again. Nolan. I turned it over without looking. Alira noticed, but didn't press. Instead, she outlined a plan: fraud checks, old loan records, buried contracts. You'll need proof, she said. Something they can't refute. Documents. Discrepancies. Missteps. I nodded. My hand clenched beneath the table. Nolan thought I'd been erased. Karina thought I'd slink away quietly. They were both wrong. I was Elias Mercer, and I was still here. Back in the apartment, the lone bulb flickered above the wobbly table. The envelope waited, its edges worn from time but still sealed. I didn't open it. Not yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something real. Hope. Quiet, steady, but undeniable. I could win this. I would. The next morning, I returned to the library. Pen gripped like a blade. The ember of hope had grown, urging me forward. Alira slid a folder toward me. Her eyes sharpened behind her glasses. This is where we begin, she said, tapping the front page. It was a news article, something about Nolan's real estate business. Headlines hinting at unhappy clients and subtle complaints. Small cracks. But cracks all the same. We'd spent days digging, poring over records in quiet corners of Avondale's libraries and cafes. The library smelled of old paper and vending machine coffee. The buzz in the background felt grounding as I scanned every line of every document. The war had begun. My fingers smudged ink across the page as we pieced together Nolan's world, laid bare in court filings, real estate records, and the curated illusions of social media. What emerged was a portrait of a man intoxicated by power and blinded by ego. Alira pointed to a photo on Karina's public profile. It was from a charity gala, her expression immaculate, yet her smile brittle. She's obsessed with control, Alira said. That's her pressure point. I nodded and jotted notes. Nolan's company was under quiet investigation, suspicions of manipulated property valuations, whispered rumors of corruption. One wrong move could unravel him. But he was arrogant, too sure of his immunity. Karina, on the other hand, lived for her pristine image. I could see her now, commanding a boardroom, poised and polished. But let a scandal break, and everything would fracture. Found something, Alira murmured, sliding her laptop toward me. It was a forum post, buried deep on a real estate complaint board. A former client accusing Nolan of exaggerating home values. If we could link it to him directly, it was the crack we needed. Her voice was calm, but her fingers tapped an erratic rhythm on the table. I leaned back, the old chair groaning beneath me. He's reckless, I said. Always has been. I thought of the envelope tucked in my apartment drawer, a quiet, persistent reminder of something more. But it could wait. For now, we needed names. Dates. Proof. Alira's expression softened as she stirred her coffee. You remind me of myself, Elias. She paused, her gaze distant. After my divorce, he took everything. My house, my dignity. I clawed my way back, but I lost my daughter along the way. She won't return my calls anymore. Her voice caught, and for a moment, the lawyer disappeared. I saw the woman beneath, the one who'd survived. I'm sorry, I said, my voice low. I know what it feels like to lose the ones you love. She gave a small wave, brushing it off, but her eyes didn't leave mine. That's why we're doing this. Not just for you. For everyone they've crushed under their heels. Later, in a downtown cafe, rain tapping on the windows and the scent of espresso thick in the air, we strategized. The streets of Avondale shimmered with wet neon. I glanced up and froze. Across the road, Karina strode past, her coat flawless, her steps purposeful. My heart jumped. I sank lower in my seat, out of view. She didn't see me, but I saw her. And the sight ignited something inside me, fury wrapped in clarity. Back at the library, we kept digging. Another name emerged, Malcolm Redd, one of Nolan's former clients. A transaction from last winter, overvalued by tens of thousands. Piece by piece, we were building a case. Alira sketched a timeline on scrap paper, her pen slicing through the silence like a blade. "We're close," she said, "but we have to be precise. No loose ends." I pictured Nolan in his office, glass walls, designer suit, that smug laugh. Karina straightening her pearls, rehearsing lines for the next meeting. They believed I was gone, but they hadn't erased me. They'd awakened me. At home, I spread our findings across my worn table. The overhead bulb flickered. Nolan's pride, Karina's obsession with public image, they weren't fortresses. They were weaknesses. My hand hovered over the name Malcolm Redd. It was time to act. I hunched over a public computer, the letter glowing on the screen in a simple word processor. My fingers tingled, tense, deliberate, each key press like cocking a trigger. The wording was neutral, anonymous. Subtle enough to protect me. Sharp enough to sting. It raised concerns about possible misconduct at Mercer Property Group, vague but suggestive. It referenced questionable deals. It named no one, but it pointed to everything. My pulse hammered. Was this betrayal? You mean nothing to us. The memory of that night. The slammed door. The rain. The cold. I hit send. The screen blinked once, and it was gone, hurtling into Nolan's empire like a stone through glass. The library remained quiet, save for a cough and the clatter of distant typing. I wiped sweat from my brow. I'd used a public network, an untraceable email. No ties to me. Still, my hands trembled as I logged out and left. Alira met me in another cafe, her coat damp from the late September mist. "It's done," she asked. I nodded, sliding into the booth. "This morning." Her eyes sparked. "Good. That was a clean strike. But they'll come back swinging Elias. Be ready." Her warning hovered, but behind it was something else, approval. I imagined Nolan in his office, his tie undone, barking orders as emails flooded in. Phones ringing. Colleagues watching, whispering. And Karina? She would unravel in silence. Her voice sharp. Her fury cold. "You've ruined us, Nolan." I could see it. Her pacing, her heels tapping like gunshots, him slamming a palm on the desk, promising to fix everything. But this time, he wouldn't. "You're quiet," Alira said, stirring her drink. Second thoughts. I shook my head. No, they earned us. But my voice trembled. I had raised that boy, loved him. Now I was dismantling the life he built. The thought burned, but I buried it. He made his choice. Days later, I found it, a news brief buried on a local site. Mercer Property Group under preliminary investigation for financial irregularities. My heart jumped. Nolan's name wasn't mentioned, not yet. But the gears were in motion. I leaned back in my chair, the cracked mug on my table within reach. And for the first time in years, I smiled. It had begun. Alira called that night. "Did you see the article?" Her voice crackled through the receiver, sharp with restrained excitement. "They're scrambling. But keep your head low. People like them don't lose quietly." "I know," I said, tracing the edge of my phone with a thumb. My thoughts drifted to the envelope in my drawer, my safety net. Maybe I'd need it if everything else collapsed. But for now, it stayed sealed. I'd made the first move, and for a moment, it had felt good. I refreshed the news site. The screen's glow carved shadows across the walls of my apartment. A second article had gone live, this one deeper, more damning. Clients were pulling their accounts. A regulatory agency was now involved. My satisfaction dimmed, replaced by an ache of unease. I had started this, but where would it end? Outside, the rain began to batter the windows. My phone lit up with another update. Something cold settled beneath my ribs. They were going to retaliate. The storm intensified, pounding the glass like fists. That creeping sense of dread stayed with me. Nolan and Karina wouldn't just fold. I knew them. They'd circle back, looking for whoever had sparked the blaze. I checked my locks again. The deadbolt felt colder than usual beneath my hand. The next day, Alira called me to meet at a park. She didn't want to talk indoors. Too many ears. The air smelled of damp leaves and distant pine. Her scarf whipped in the wind as she spoke. "Someone's sniffing around," she said, voice hushed. "I saw a man yesterday at the cafe. Just watching. He didn't order anything. Didn't leave a tip. Private investigator, maybe." She tried to stay composed, but her white-knuckled grip on her purse betrayed her nerves. My stomach dropped. "Because of the letter?" She nodded once, curtly. A jogger passed behind us, the gravel crunching underfoot. "They're spooked, Elias." "That's good. But it means they're unpredictable now. Maybe desperate." I imagined Nolan hunched in his sterile office, lips thin with fury, ordering background checks and surveillance. Karina wouldn't rage. She'd direct her orders coldly, surgically. "Find out who did this, or we're finished." That was her power, calculated control. But now their perfect life was unraveling thread by thread. And I pulled the first one loose. But at what cost? We walked along the soggy path, our shoes sinking slightly into the mud. Alira's voice softened. "I've been here before, you know. When my ex filed for divorce, he hired someone to dig into me. Thought he could shame me into silence. Found nothing, but it still kept me up for weeks." She exhaled, breath visible in the early frost. "We'll outthink them. We have to." I nodded, but my stomach coiled tighter. What if they traced the letter? What if they came after her? That night, the envelope crossed my mind again. It was more than just insurance now. It might be our only real weapon. I sat alone, digging through memories I'd buried. Nolan at 14, swearing he hadn't taken the money from my wallet. "Wasn't me, Dad," he'd said, eyes wide, steady, lying without flinching. I'd forgiven him then. Told myself he'd grow out of it. But he hadn't. That boy had become the man who threw me out of my own house. The memory burned. Hardened me. Alira and I met again at a diner, noisy, crowded, safe. The clang of plates masked our whispers. "They're closing in," she said, sliding a napkin across the table. On it, a name. Victor Krell, private investigator. He's experienced, but not subtle. "Asked the librarian about you." I stiffened. My coffee sat untouched. "What do we do?" "Stay hidden," she said. "No more public Wi-Fi. Keep your phone off when you're not using it. No patterns. No slips." She reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. Her grip was firm. "We're smarter than they are, Elias. Don't forget that." I tried to hold on to that belief. But back at my apartment, the walls felt tighter. I tucked our notes into a shoebox and hid it behind the radiator. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. The street outside was quiet, too quiet. Liam's cold lies. Karina's icy smile. They weren't just circling now. They were hunting. My phone rang. An unknown number. I didn't move. The call stopped. But the silence that followed was worse. Then a creak outside my window. Sharp. Unmistakable. I froze. My fists clenched. My chest pounded. They were close. Too close. I had to move faster. The next day, I stood in the park again. Umbrella in hand, the frame rattling against the wind. Last night's creak had haunted me, kept me staring at the ceiling until dawn. But this morning I was steady. Alira waited on a bench, her scarf unraveling in the breeze. Her notebook was open, pen darting across the pages. "We have to be precise," she said. "One mistake, and they'll pounce." The smell of wood smoke drifted on the breeze. A dog barked somewhere, the sound lost in the mist. I tightened my coat. My notes were tucked inside a worn journal. "The document," I said quietly. "It's our advantage." Her eyes narrowed. "The original deed?" I nodded. There was a flaw in the transfer. Legally, it's still mine. I didn't explain more. Not yet. The document was locked away, fragile but powerful. If used right, it could dismantle Nolan's empire in a single stroke. Alira leaned closer, her breath fogging between us. "Then we file, but discreetly. And while that moves through the system, we keep them distracted." She began listing options. Anonymous reports. More pressure on the regulators. Subtle whispers in the right places. Hit their weaknesses, she said. Nolan's ego. Karina's fear of scandal. Pin them down from all sides. I jotted it down, my fingers steady despite the chill. They thought I was done. They were wrong. I wasn't the man they'd thrown out anymore. I was a strategist now, building a trap with steady hands and a sharper mind. But doubt lingered in the corners of my thoughts. What if this changes me, Alira? What if I lose who I am? She smirked and closed her notebook. If we mess this up, I'll treat you to the worst coffee in Eastmark. Deal? Her humor cracked the tension. I laughed, awkward, rusty. It had been too long since laughter felt real. She wasn't just an ally anymore. She was a friend. Someone who saw me when I'd all but vanished. We laid the next moves carefully. An anonymous letter to the city about Nolan's property deals, vague, yet razor-sharp. A legal draft, quietly prepared, ready to file a claim on the house. Every step was another brick in the structure I was building. I thought of Nolan's arrogant smile, Karina's cold stare. They had misjudged me. That would be their downfall. A jogger passed nearby, hood up, and my pulse jumped. I scanned the park, half expecting one of Nolan's hired men. You're jumpy, Alira said, voice low and calm. He's just running. But her grip on her bag tightened all the same. I flipped through my journal, its pages thick with dates, names, vulnerabilities. Nolan's legal missteps. Karina's fear of public disgrace. Their walls were crumbling, and I now held the threads. We're close, I murmured. We are, she agreed. But this is chess, Elias. One move at a time. She stood, scarf fluttering. Her figure cut sharply against the gray clouds. I folded the pages, their crisp edges pressing into my palms. This wasn't just a plan anymore. This was control. Back at my apartment, the radiator hissed faintly. I slipped the notes into my coat pocket. They anchored me. The deed sat untouched in its drawer. But this was bigger now. The game was in motion, and I was ready to play. I opened the news site. There it was. Nolan Mercer, my son, the man I raised, unraveling. The headline screamed, Mercer Group fined for questionable dealings. My chest tightened, not from fear, but with a strange, biting satisfaction. I leaned back, letting the article unfold line by line. Fines, vanished investors, watchdog agencies circling. His name wasn't in bold. It didn't have to be. Those who knew would see. The whispers would grow. Phones would fall silent. I imagined him in his designer office, tie undone, face pale, yelling at no one as the walls closed in. And Karina? Her fury wouldn't be loud, it would be ice. A single, cutting phrase, "You're ruining everything, Nolan. Fix it or I'm gone." He'd beg. She'd turn away. Her heels echoing on their polished floors. Later, Alira joined me at a cafe, warm and scented with cinnamon. December rain drizzled down the windows behind her. You saw it, she asked, sliding into the booth. I nodded. My coffee sat untouched. It's working. But my stomach twisted. I could still see Nolan as a boy, arms around my neck after a school play, whispering, "I'll make you proud, Dad." Now I was dismantling his life. He's my son, I said quietly. He still is, Alira replied, her voice gentle but firm. But he chose this. And he'll fight back. She sipped her tea, her fingers perfectly steady. He might suspect you, Elias. Watch yourself. I nodded. I thought of the deed locked away, a lifeline, a detonator. But for now, this, watching him buckle, was enough. My mind wandered to the past again. Nolan at 17, caught slipping cash from my wallet. His eyes wide, voice trembling. I'll change. I'll make you proud. I'd believed him. I was wrong. My phone buzzed. His name appeared. I stared. My thumb hovered. Then I declined the call. The screen dimmed. But my heart didn't settle. He was reaching for me. Maybe desperate. Maybe furious. I didn't care. Alira leaned forward. You hit hard. But people like him? They get ruthless when they're wounded. There was a warning in her tone, but also a spark. We shared it. The thrill of reclaiming power. That night, I checked the locks again. The deadbolt clicked into place, cool beneath my hand. The radiator clanked softly in the background. I reopened the article. There were updates. A client suing. A business partner walking away. The ripple effect spreading. I smiled. Then the smile faded. Nolan wasn't just losing revenue. He was losing his grip. And I'd done it. My phone rang again. His name flashed on the screen like a warning flare. I powered it off. Silence returned, heavier now. He was close. I could feel it in my bones. The next move wasn't mine alone anymore. I watched the phone. No more calls. Just stillness. But I knew Karina was next. Nolan's fall had fractured their fortress. She would be next to slip. January's cold settled into the apartment, the radiator fighting to keep up. At my table, I tapped the edge of my notebook. Karina thought I was finished. An old man to erase. She'd learned different. Alira and I moved fast. At the library, on a borrowed computer, we crafted another letter, anonymous, clinical, calculated. It detailed Karina's manipulation of her company's marketing budget. Small diversions, hidden overcharges, funds redirected with precision. Just enough to stall a promotion. Maybe enough to destroy her career. I sent it to her firm's ethics board. My fingers hovered over the key. Then I pressed send. And watched the confirmation blink on screen. It was done. I imagined Karina now in her glass-walled office, her practiced smile faltering as her supervisor summoned her behind closed doors. She'd lash out at colleagues, her voice raised, her control unraveling. At home, she'd turn on Nolan, her tone laced with venom. This is your fault. Your weakness is tearing everything down. He'd bark back, fists clenched. It's not me, Karina. Someone's targeting us. Their marriage, built on shared ambition, was splintering, and I held the hammer. Alira met me at a downtown diner, her expression drawn tight. The letter landed, she said, sliding a clipped article across the table. Her firm's investigating. She's walking on a wire. Her voice was level, but her eyes flicked to the door, alert for watchers. I leaned back, the booth creaking beneath me. Good. But the victory felt uneasy. Karina wasn't like Nolan. She was sharper, colder, more dangerous. I remembered the first time I met her at their engagement party. Her handshake had been firm, her smile flawless. But her eyes had scanned me and dismissed me in the same breath. That memory sharpened me now. You're enjoying this, Alira said, half smiling. She's cornered, I replied, my voice harder than I expected. Let her try. The deed, the secret ace, remained in my drawer. I didn't meet it. Not yet. Bringing her down felt right. Strategic. Once, from across the street, I caught sight of Karina. Her coat was buttoned tight, her pace quick. Her face pale, tense. She didn't see me, but I felt it, she was unraveling. And I had pulled the thread. That night, I read the headline again. Marketing exec under review for budget misconduct. The words glowed on my screen. A quiet triumph. But Alira's caution echoed back. She's dangerous. And I knew she was. I thought of Nolan's unanswered calls. Were they speaking now? Plotting retaliation? It didn't matter. They weren't finished. I locked my door, the bolt cold beneath my palm. The air inside was heavy with winter. I scanned the news one last time, then froze. A car idled outside. Lights off. Black against the dull orange of the street lamp. Someone was watching. My breath caught. My pulse thudded in my ears. They were coming. By morning, the car was gone. But the unease lingered like smoke. February wind cut through my coat as I stepped to the mailbox. My breath billowed out in clouds. Inside waited a thick envelope. My name printed in cold, stark ink. My hands trembled as I tore it open. A court summons. Nolan and Karina were suing me for defamation. They claimed I'd waged a campaign of lies, that I was a bitter, unstable man lashing out after being rejected. I paced the apartment, the summons crushed in my fist. The radiator hissed beside me, but all I felt was cold. I imagined Nolan in a tailored suit, smug as he dictated instructions to his legal team. Karina beside him, voice low and deadly, guiding each move. He's nothing, she'd whisper, just like that night. Fear surged, but then something stronger took its place. Defiance. They wouldn't bury me. Not this time. Alira met me in the library. Rain clung to her coat in droplets. "They're panicking," she said, scanning the document. "This isn't strength, Elias. It's fear dressed as a threat." Her fingers tapped the table. "This summons is weak. Empty. They know we've got them cornered." She pushed up her glasses, her eyes blazing. "We have the deed. We strike back." I sank into the chair. Around us, the quiet of the library dulled the noise in my head. "What if we lose?" I asked, my voice breaking despite me. Alira reached across the table. Her hand brushed mine, firm and warm. "We won't. That contract is airtight. They never thought you'd fight." Her confidence pulled me back like an anchor in a storm. She wasn't just my attorney. She was my ally, my shield. We worked for hours. Documents spread across the table like a war map. The original deed, tucked safely at home, was our nuclear option. A clerical error that left the property in my name. Alira's pen scratched across paper, each stroke calculated. "We file our counter quietly. Let them think they're winning." I nodded. The fear softened, replaced by something steadier. Conviction. I wasn't their victim anymore. I remembered Nolan at 16, caught lying about a stolen car. "I messed up, Dad," he'd said, tears falling. I'd embraced him, believing love could fix it. I was wrong. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who called me nothing and cast me aside. Outside, I saw him again across the street. Phone to his ear. His face drawn. I ducked behind a post, heart pounding. He didn't see me, but I knew. They were close now. Too close. Back home, I rechecked the locks. The cold metal felt like armor. The summons lay on my table, waiting. I wouldn't run from it. Not this time. The deed was my sword, my defense, my final blow. I stood before the mirror. The reflection staring back was leaner, sharper. The eyes familiar, but harder. Not broken. Ready. I slipped the envelope into my pocket. Its weight grounded me. Tomorrow, the battlefield would shift. I stood in front of the mirror again, this time in a suit, worn at the shoulders, but clean. The fabric was tight, but the envelope inside my coat gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. The courthouse loomed ahead, its stone steps slick with March rain. My heart pounded, but I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Today, I would end it. The deed, yellowed, fragile, absolute, was my truth. Nolan and Karina would finally have to face it. Inside, the courtroom smelled of varnish and old paper. Wooden benches creaked beneath the weight of spectators. Nolan sat at the plaintiff's table, his jaw clenched, his suit spotless. Karina, beside him, adjusted her silk scarf, her expression smooth, but I saw the twitch in her fingers, the strain behind her eyes. They thought they'd already won. Alira leaned close and whispered, "You've got this, Elias." Her calm steadied me. Her presence reminded me just how far we'd come. The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair and a gaze that silenced the room, called us to order. Their lawsuit for defamation was their weapon. But I had something stronger. Their lawyer spoke first. His voice was practiced, elegant, painting me as bitter, unstable, consumed by resentment. Nolan nodded along, glancing at me with barely concealed scorn. Karina's lips curled in a faint, knowing smirk. I remained silent. My hands were still, my mind focused. Then our turn. Alira rose with quiet command. "Your Honor," she said, her tone precise, "we have evidence that fundamentally changes the case." She gestured to me. I stood, my legs steady, and approached the bench. "This," I said, holding up the document, "is the original deed for the house. It was never properly transferred. The property is still legally mine." A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge adjusted her glasses and began reading. Nolan shifted forward, his posture rigid. His voice burst out, sharp and cracking. "That's a lie. He's fabricating this." Karina gripped his arm, her nails digging in. Her mask had slipped, eyes wide, lips parted. "Enough," the judge said, raising her hand. She continued reading, her brow tightening with each line. I remembered the day I signed that paper. I thought I was giving Nolan a future. I trusted him. Now, that same paper had become my redemption. Mr. Mercer, the judge said, addressing Nolan, this document is valid. The transfer was never completed. The property belongs to the defendant. Gasps stirred across the room. Nolan rose, chair screeching behind him. No, he can't. Karina's purse slipped to the floor. Her face had gone pale. She muttered something under her breath, but the words vanished into the noise. Alira leaned toward me, her breath warm. You did it, Elias. I gave a quiet nod. The triumph was real, but it wasn't without weight. Their downfall, their collapse, was mine to bear too. Yet the sting of betrayal, the cruelty of that night, had less power now. The judge brought down the gavel. Their claim was dismissed. I stood, my stride steady, and walked from the courtroom into the cold, clean air. Alira followed, a wide smile on her face. I felt lighter, freer. But questions remained. What now? I touched the envelope in my pocket. Its purpose fulfilled. The future lay open. I stepped into the March air, and it felt sharp with possibility. A week later, the ruling came in writing. The house was mine. The deed had held. Nolan and Karina's world, built on betrayal, had collapsed. Their money, their reputation, their marriage, it was all unraveling. And I'd survived. But the real victory wasn't the house. It was me. In June, sun warmed the streets of Alridge as I walked through the old house one last time. The floors creaked, thick with memory. Nolan's laughter as a boy. Helena's voice from the kitchen. My hand brushed the banister, worn smooth by decades of touch. This house had been my heart. Now it felt like a weight. That afternoon, I called a realtor. The pen in my hand felt light, freeing. I didn't need these walls anymore. Alira met me at a sunlit cafe, her scarf bright against the summer glare. You're free now, she said, unfolding a map across the table. Paris? Rome? Her laugh danced on the air. We'd become close, something real, unexpected. She hadn't just defended me in court. She had pulled me out of the dark. I took a sip of coffee. The bitterness had softened. Both, I said with a grin. Europe, once a distant dream, buried under sacrifice, was alive again. I thought of Helena, her hand in mine, her voice soft with love. Live, Elias. Don't stop. I'd failed her once, pouring myself into Nolan, chasing validation. But not anymore. Her photo sat framed on a table in my new apartment, a modest, bright place that smelled of new paint and possibility. The weeks following the trial were quiet. News trickled in. Nolan's firm collapsed. His clients walked. Karina's reputation shattered. Her career stalled, her name whispered behind closed doors. I pictured them arguing, blaming each other. Their voices raised, their partnership in ruins. I felt no glee, only peace. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. I sold the house for a good price, enough to fund the travel I'd once traded for school tuitions and mortgage payments. The money didn't matter. The freedom did. Alira and I planned our trip with guidebooks and laughter. Mispronounced French. Circles around cities on worn maps. This was my second chance. And I was ready. She would visit her daughter first, try to mend what time and hurt had broken. I hoped it worked. She deserved that chance. My new apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint, the walls still unscuffed, the windows catching the golden light of early morning. I moved through it slowly, my footsteps quiet and deliberate. On a small shelf near the window sat a framed photograph of Helena. I'm living now, I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. Justice had come with a price, sharp and bitter, but it had freed me. I wasn't the man who had stood alone in the rain that night, suitcase in hand, discarded and hollow. I was Elias Mercer, and I was whole again. I stepped out onto the front stoop, the late summer air soft against my face. In my hand was a boarding pass, the paper crisp, the promise behind it immeasurable. First stop, Paris, then Rome, then wherever my heart decided to wander. The sun warmed my skin as I smiled. The past had closed, and the future, unwritten, unburdened, was finally mine. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Subscribe to keep this conversation going.